we've been talking about how our clients' patterns are the common denominator of their experience. It's the common denominator of all that they bring to coaching. And what we're going to share here is the top 3 ways our clients tend to get in their own way. In other words, kind of the top 3 patterns I've seen in my clients and how they show up in the issues they bring to coaching. Okay, pattern number 1. And it relates to what they focus on, and in particular, who they focus on. So we humans will tend to err on the side of focusing too much on our own responsibility for ourselves and the people around us and our work, our jobs, our lives, or we'll tend to err on the side of focusing too much on others and giving our power away. In other words, giving away our self-agency. And it turns out that we've been studying this at Learning in Action for the last 15 plus years, and we found that about 60% of the population are more self-oriented, meaning they take more responsibility than is theirs to take, and about 40% of the population is more other-oriented, meaning they tend to not experience their life through a lens of self-agency. Okay, and the ideal is that we both recognize our own responsibility, but we take responsibility for ourselves and not the people around us, right? And we stay connected with other people by looking into what their experience is as well and holding them as responsible, like we're in this together, right? So that's the ideal, is that we can focus on ourselves and others and selves and others. And what it looks like when a client is more self-oriented, meaning they tend to consider more responsibility is theirs. And what it looks like, and I imagine this will sound familiar to you, is they raise their hand for everything. They say, I'll do that, I'll do that. Volunteer? Yes, count on me. And particularly when something might go wrong, they'll catch every ball before it drops. They'll catch, and not just their proverbial ball, but that of those around them. Oh, I know I won't let you fail, and I'm not going to let you fail. And in the meantime, they are overwhelmed, right? That they have spent so much of their experience not catching everything that might drop for them and the others, that they're overwhelmed. And sometimes they're really loved by the people that work for them, because it's like, okay, let me get that, I'll catch that for you. At the same time, the way that people learn is by making their own mistakes. And people who take on too much responsibility for themselves and other people will kind of enable the behavior of others and not even put them in a position where they can make a mistake. Also, people who, reflexively, and this is a pattern, so it's reflexively say, yes, I'll do that, I'll take that on, okay. They'll become so overwhelmed that they'll be just exhausted, and they won't say anything. They won't complain. They won't say no mas. They won't say, they won't draw a boundary. Right? And in the meantime, they suffer, and the people who love them suffer. If they're a parent and have children, the children suffer because they don't see them as much. So that's how we can pick up on that in our coaching, is by listening to the overwhelm of our clients. And we can begin to ask them when we begin to detect this pattern, we can begin to ask them, what is your responsibility? Or where does your responsibility end and someone else's pick up? So we can help them begin to see that they're taking on more responsibility than is theirs to take. Now, for those of our clients who are other-oriented, they will tend to show up and we'll ask them questions about them and what they want and what they think and what they feel. And they will talk all about their boss, and they'll talk about how their employee isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they'll talk about how things aren't going well at home. They'll talk about things outside themselves. And when you ask them, well, what do you feel? They'll go off like again and tell you another story about what's happening, right? And it's because they don't know what they feel. They don't know what they want. They don't know what they think oftentimes. And it's because their focus is on what's happening out there. You know, they're kind of reflexively scanning the environment outside of them, oftentimes scanning the environment for threat or what's not going right. Not always, but oftentimes. So when we work with those clients who don't know what they think and what they want and what they feel, is to help them see, hey, you know, I keep asking you what you think and you keep redirecting me out here. Are you noticing that? So we make them aware of that. And then two, we don't allow ourselves to be discouraged from asking the question, no, really, this is your life. What do you want? What do you feel? Using a feeling word. What do you think? You know, so that they can begin to take their power back, power they don't even recognize that they're giving someone else. And they might tend to not always have good relationships because they aren't in them. You know, if they don't know what they think and what they want and what they feel, they're not in the relationship. So that's the number one way in which our clients can get in their own way, is they tend to focus too much on themselves or too much on the other person. The second way our clients can get in their own way is by keeping their joy bucket too low. You know, our clients, many of them work so hard, you know, and they're, you know, maybe feel like they have to. I mean, our culture is very much kind of a hard work culture oftentimes. And we can tend to figure out, okay, we've got to make this amount of money and we've got to be the perfect parent and we've got to, you know, give our kids these things. And the result can be, we can become so depleted. And when we're depleted, like energetically, vitally depleted, then we become really not resilient, not kind of malleable. It becomes very, very hard to stay in relationship. You know, in particular, it becomes very hard to collaborate and stay in what we call the 1,000 tiny paper cuts of being in relationship. You know, when our joy bucket is low, it's just painful, right? We don't have that that wherewithal, that buoyance, in order to kind of roll with the inevitable challenges in life. So when our clients show up and they seem agitated and they're you know, have a hard time with a positive kind of feeling good about themselves and their lives and their situations, and they just kind of show up depleted, energetically, emotionally depleted, then that's time for them to fill their joy bucket. And a lot of people, if you ask them what gives you joy, they're like, I don't know. It's been so long since I've felt joy. I don't remember. So what we as coaches can do is ask them, what gave you joy as a child? Like, how did you fill your joy bucket as a child? Like, what do you remember? And then help them figure out how they can bring that into their life, bring some joy back into their life so they can fill their joy bucket and be more resilient in everything they do. The third way our clients will tend to get in their own way is by relying too much on doing. So we have 3 dimensions of our internal experience. We have our thinking, we have our feeling, and we have our wanting, which means our intention toward action. And as I mentioned, we've been studying this at Learning in Action for 15 years. And what we've noticed is the majority of people lean toward being what we call wants oriented or actions oriented. I mean, ideally, we'd rely on every dimension of our experience equally. We'd rely on our thinking mind, and we'd rely on our wanting, and we'd rely on our feeling state all evenly, because all of those dimensions have information for us, and they're all equally valuable. And one of the things I see over and over and over again in my clients is they will have a bias toward acting. And they will tend to act because it will make them feel better. All of these patterns we're talking about are what makes us feel better, particularly under stress. So when they maybe didn't do something correctly, or they get a nasty gram email, or whatever the situation is, they may tend to act before really thinking it through. And if they have a difficult time being with the feeling of anxiety, they may act to protect themselves from feeling anxious. So that can get, our clients can be in a chronic state of ready, fire, aim. Right? And they will justify it. They will justify it all day long because they've spent a lifetime justifying it, that they can clean it up on the back end. They will act, and even if it's wrong, they'll act some more and clean it up on the back end, and that will make them feel better. And it can hurt relationships. It can be incredibly inefficient, and it's a pattern. It's a pattern of self-soothing, particularly under stress, that doesn't eventually get us what we want. So those are the top 3 ways clients will tend to get in their own way, either by focusing too much on themselves or by focusing too much on the others, by letting their joy bucket get too low, and by relying too much on their wants, by acting too quickly. So those are the top 3 ways clients get in their own way. And because these are patterned ways of being, it's 1, really hard for them to see it, and 2, they can justify it till the cows come home because they've been doing it their entire lives. So how do we help our clients begin to see, 1, their patterns, and 2, the cost of their patterns? Well, that's where the EQ profile comes in. It helps your clients see their patterns, see how they're getting in their own way, in ways that don't serve them. Because when they can see their patterns, they can see the common denominator of their entire life experience, and they can begin to change and shift it to unpattern those loops, those recursive loops, so that they can begin to live a life that's more true to their own expression, to live a life of choice, not default, not some kind of default patterning that they inherited or were born into. They can live a life of their own design, and you can help them. I hope you've enjoyed this video series. It's been a delight to put together, and there's lots more where this came from. If you enjoyed it, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We'd love for you to join us.